Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and today we're going to be talking about the Wonder Twins, who a lot of people hate. And I don't. I don't hate the Wonder Twins at all. In fact, I kind of love the Wonder Twins. I'm going to tell you a little bit of why that is. I've got a son who, as of me recording this, is 20 years old. My daughter is 19 years old. And when they were little kids, my daughter was always kind of big for her age. So my kids looked like twins, right? They looked like they were the same age. And everywhere we went, not everywhere, but I mean, a lot of the time, people would ask if they were twins. It was a very common thing. So my kids, I think, kind of leaned into that. And something else we did a lot is we'd go to Walmart and they had the cheap bin of DVDs, and I would find stuff that I enjoyed as a kid and bring it home, and we'd all watch it together. And so one day I found a bunch of Super Friends stuff in that bin, showed it to my kids for the first time, and they loved the Wonder Twins. Like when you're an adult and you're a little more analytical and stuff like that, and you watch the show and you pick up on things that you're like, well, that's not realistic, or this doesn't make sense, or whatever, right? Like kids don't do that. So, so my kids, I think because they kind of acted like twins, and then here's characters that are kind of like twins, they like related to them. And so my kids then would watch Super Friends and they wanted to watch it in like a they were never into binging anything. They wanna watch like a single episode and then they wanna go play. So they would watch, an episode with the Wonder Twins and then they'd start running around the house afterwards. And my daughter would be like, "Form of a Tyrannosaurus Rex." And my son would be like, "Shape of an ice tank." And they'd do the knuckle bump and they would play it out, and my son would be whatever, in a little cardboard box or something, puttering around the living room, acting like he was a tank. And my daughter would be a T-Rex, threatening to eat me or something like that. It was very cute. And so that whole thing, right? Um, because being a dad is like such a huge part of my life. I would argue it's the prime core thing for me. And they made me love the Wonder Twins, you know? But that wasn't the only time, or I should say, and then they would play him in the game. And even up until maybe early high school, they were still playing the Wonder Twins a little bit in the game. Um, and they kinda outgrew it in a way, which sorta made me sad. Um, but we had a lot of fun with it. And I think one of the complaints that people often have about the Wonder Twins is you watch an episode. And, like, I just watched an episode of Super Friends, actually, and it was something about they had to go rescue Aquaman. And so the girl, Jaina, she says, "Form of a seagull," and the boy, Zan, says, "Shape of a" what was it? It was like one of those lifts, like when you go like skiing down a mountain or whatever, like a ski resort, the lifts that take you up the mountain. I think it was one of those, like a gondola or whatever they call it. Um, but like I'm watching the show, I'm like, what an odd choice. My players never have turned into a gondola, you know? Um, they always turn into something really advantageous and really cool. And like when you have the limitation of like I can only be something made of ice or I can only be an animal or whatever, that's actually part of the fun of the game then, is you gotta think within those confines, so that it's challenging. And so my kids did it for a long time. Um, I remember Jason Seidner, who's another dear friend of mine, and he has played the game for years and years and years. He was playing, I think it was Jaina, actually, because I think he was playing Jaina for a while, and I think Chris Cross was playing Zan. And so when he was playing the Jaina character, I remember one day he's like, "So I can turn into like any living creature, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Cool. I want to be Godzilla. Like I want to be a big purple Godzilla, and I want my atomic breath weapon to be kind of like a black light, like that real neon purple color." And I was like, "Hey, I hear what you're saying." And I was like, "I don't know if you can do that." And so I had to do a little research into it, and I think he can. I think that's absolutely on the table, that the girl can just be Godzilla whenever she wants. And I was like, "Holy crap, like, the Wonder Twins are actually, like, way tougher than I realized they were." So and even, 'cause I feel like there's always going to be someone that leaves a comment that's like, "Well, they can't do that in the comics, or they couldn't do that on the show," or whatever. At the end of the day, the fact that, it's not Earth 1 or whatever, it's not the actual DC Earth. We've always been very, very clear that our game takes place in a world called Earth K, which is somewhere else out there in the multiverse. So, if nothing else, on Earth K, our Jaina can turn into Godzilla anytime she wants, which I like because if you're on a team with Superman, right? And at this point in our timeline, we're talking about the pre-crisis Superman, like just throwing planets at people and stuff, right? Being able to turn into Godzilla gives you a spot on that team, right? And then the other thing Seidner came up, well, he came up with a lot of stuff. At one point, he was like, form of a disease. And I was like, what? There's no way you can like do that. And again, we had to go to Google, and he got the idea, I guess, from an episode of the Teen Titans cartoon where Beast Boy did something similar. And he turned into some kind of a germ or whatever, a virus or something that was a living thing, and he got somebody really, really sick. And so Seidner was sort of like, you know, he says it, he gives it the cheesy delivery like it's an episode of Super Friends, and then the juxtaposition becomes funny. So he'd be like, "Form of Black Death." And we're like, "Holy cow, all right." Um, and then I'm pretty like I'm 99% sure that Chris Cross was the one playing Zan. And then he was seeing sort of like the Godzilla stuff. And then his go-to became because he's Kroos himself is of Norse descent, and that was always kind of he was doing stuff along those lines in a lot of games. And so in the Norse stuff, there's this ice giant named Ymir. I think that's the right name. But so he was kind of mimicking that. And so if the girl was kind of like, that kind of a kaiju, Kroos would turn into like this gigantic ice monster. And something we figured out after a while was that the way the rules work is you have so many APs of a power, like whether it's shape change or self manipulation or whatever, they're different flavors of the idea of I turn into a thing, and then I have my power has some kind of a number after it. And all the stuff this thing I turn into, all the things it can do, that is all going to have a number assigned to it. And all those numbers have to add up to whatever the number my power is, right? So for instance, if you have 50 APs of shape change, you could then, raise your strength to a 25 and your body to a 25, stuff like that. And anything you had before, like your IQ or the ability to walk or whatever, you just keep that, right, for free. So so at any rate, when they were growing, they realized that they were kind of wasting points because they had to spend points on growth. So if you had 20 APs of growth, that's 20 points that you didn't put into your strength. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? If it doesn't make sense, as always, put something in the comments section and I'll be happy to clear it up. But so that led to, I remember this one game where Seidner, and he wasn't being a punk. He was very like respectful and, all that. And he was always very open to the idea that if something was going to become unbalancing, like he didn't want to ruin the game, right? But he's on the Justice League with Superman, and so he's like, so if Jaina, because she keeps mentioning stuff like, form of a Venusian unicorn, and it was like weird stuff, right? But it was things from other planets. And by the way, for those that don't know, in their secret identities, what Jaina does is she basically turns into a girl that looks like Barbie. And so she actually turns into a human because they're from a planet called Exor. So I guess their race is Exorian. So Jaina can turn into a human, right, with blonde hair and blue eyes, and her skin, it lightens up where then it becomes Caucasian, when she's turning into this other race. And so we're like, wow, that's kind of interesting that Jaina can do that. She can be human. So Seidner the one day is like, okay, great. How about form of Supergirl? And we were all really taken aback by that. And I was like, well, I don't know about that. It was not, I know this is a recurring theme. There was a lot of stuff came up with him where I was like, I don't know about that. Like, let's kind of pause the game for a minute and think this through. And so Seidner was like, yeah, like I want to have like a lavender kind of like a spandex shirt. I want the same symbol that Jaina has on the chest, but I want the skirt to be like the darker purple, and her big like dark purple collar instead becomes like a dark purple cape. And basically, yeah, she's she's pretty much the Jaina version of Supergirl, right? With all the powers of a pre-crisis Kryptonian. And we thought about it, and and spoiler, they've done it in the comics. There's an old they made a Super Friends comic book that took place, I want to say, on Earth 1A. I think I've got the right thing. I can look it up later, but at any rate, but she does it. And we didn't know that at the time. But so yeah, we allowed it, and then we're like, holy crap, like she's really powerful. And then with Zan, and we tried to keep him, the same power level as much as we could. Zan realized that he was wasting points growing when he turned into Ymir, the ice giant. He's like, I can actually just have like really, really awesome attacks and basically look like Iceman. And so that became what he was doing. And so a lot of the Wonder Twin games then in that era became kind of like Supergirl and Iceman going on adventures. Um and then and I know this is all out of order. I'm kind of going in reverse order here. Some of my favorite games, which admittedly, like we would play this when we were in college, and our sense of humor, this is before Robot Chicken came out. We're the same age as the guys who made Robot Chicken. And a lot of the ideas we had in terms of humor was along those lines. And so um Howard Warnes, who I've mentioned in other videos, and affectionately I say that he is equal parts completely insane and a genius, like a legit genius. Um, he went to engineering school when he was off to the university. So he's a very, very smart guy, sharp as a whip, and he is hands down the funniest person I've ever met. Howard Howard will get you laughing, and like you'll have tears in your eyes and you'll like struggle to breathe, and you'll feel like you're going to pass out, and he just will not stop. And he is relentless in what he does, right? And so he was at one point playing one of the Wonder Twins. And Greg Sheets, who by the way is a dear friend of mine, he follows what I'm doing here. He corrected me recently. I said Greg was the third GM of our game. I didn't know it. He was running it before that at home, same continuity. So Greg's actually GM number two, but it's really neither here nor there. He was the other Wonder Twin then. Howard, by the way, was GM number six. So Howard and Greg were playing the Wonder Twins, not all the time, but a little bit, back when we were in college in like the mid 90s. And The go-to thing became it was this thing one day. I won't be able to do this justice, but it was this thing they were doing one day, and this is a little kind of a dirty joke. So if you're offended by that sort of thing, just skip ahead a little. One of them goes shape of a rabid gorilla, and the other one is like, no, I'm sorry, it's form of a rabid gorilla, and then the other one says shape of an ice phallus. And Ford makes this gesture. He does such a good gorilla impression. It's hard for me to explain. He has this almost Jim Carrey-like ability to contort his face. And so the first thing he does that's funny is just this incredible uh ape face that he's doing where he's like puffing out his cheeks and he's like doing something with his eyebrows to make him kind of low and everything. And he gets this look in his eyes like he's just not all there, you know. Um, and he moves and he's like there's too much movement that's kind of like the left to right thing. Like you ever see a gorilla walk towards somebody and they're cut like their side goes down really far and their right side goes down really far. You know what I mean? Like that walk. So we'd be playing in the living room or something like that, and he would do this. And he was making this gesture over his head as if he were carrying a log, and he's making these sort of threatening, thrusting motions at whoever he's walking towards, and he starts doing the gorilla sounds where he's like, getting more and more worked up the closer to you he gets. It was so funny. I'm probably not doing it justice at all, and I apologize, but, like, that became the go-to joke was and, like, anytime and not even in games anymore, it would be like, we'd be at the comic shop or, like, right next to the comic shop was this really awesome, restaurant that's still there, by the way, in Worcester, Ohio, called the Hero House. I'm gonna give them a free commercial right now. The Hero House is the best subs and the best Philly cheesesteak and so on and so forth that I've ever had in my life. It's amazing. I remember one time Greg Cheats, who I mentioned earlier, he said that if he could only had like one last meal, you know, what would you eat? He picked that place, and he's right. I totally agree with him now. At any rate, so we'd be in there, like, we would sorta, like, hang out at the comic shop, like, all day on a Saturday or something, and then we'd bring a little money with us, so at noon or whatever, we'd go over to Hero House, and Greg would be or excuse me, Howard would be doing his monkey or ape impression rather. It was hilarious, and so it got to be this thing where, like, if we were in the comic shop and some random dude would come in and he would start talking about how he loved, you know, whatever Neil Gaiman's Sandman or something like that, and what a piece of crap show Super Friends was. Greg, who Greg tends to be kind of a thin, um, subdued, you know, very kind of quiet, calm kind of guy, glasses. Greg, Greg would look up from whatever he was reading and be like, "Oh no," and Howard would come from around the corner doing that gesture over his head, you know, threatening this random customer. It was all great fun. Good times. Um, but yeah, they played the Wonder Twins a bunch of times, and we've had a lot of fun with the characters over the years. So I every time I hear people say the Wonder Twins suck, I guess this is what I'll end on. Every time I hear people say, really any character sucks. I'm trying to remember who said it. It might be Mark Wade back in the day, who said, "There's no such thing as a bad character, just bad writers." And I think that's true. I've I've taken that quote to heart over the years, and for a while, for instance, I ran a campaign. Like there used to be a thing called Wizard Magazine, which was awesome. Sort of like before we had the internet, we had Wizard, and it was telling us what was coming out. It was interviews with creators and, you know, so on and so forth. But they had this thing they did in there kind of as like a joke. running gag thing called the Mort of the Month, and I ran a whole campaign for a while where Wizard would come out with that month's Mort of the Month, and then I would put them in a adventure where I tried to make them uh cool, or if they're a villain, like legitimately scary or whatever, you know. And so I remember kind of reworking the Kite Man character a little bit. And I made Kite Man, really, I just used Batman. Like on paper, he was Batman. So that he had stuff he could throw at you. It's just, it would be shaped like a little kite. Everything was kite themed. And so people, you know, would start the encounter like, "Oh, Kite Man, what are you gonna do?" You know, what a loser. And then he'd kick their butt. I remember doing that with the Vulture too. I remember beating up Chris Cross's character with the Vulture at one point, but I'm off topic. So the Wonder Twins would absolutely be uh the Wizards Mort of the Month at some point, right? Um, but you can always take a character and do something with them. And hopefully the stuff I've described today shows you some of the stuff that we did that I do genuinely think our Wonder Twins are cool at least. Um, we also, I'll throw this out there, I guess, before I know I said I was over and I keep thinking more stuff. Another thing we were talking about doing at one point, I don't think we ever actually did it. Because before my kids started playing the Wonder Twins, we had a lot of ideas about maybe taking them in a darker direction. And like one thing we talked about doing was we were going to do surgery on their hands. And we were going to like basically, you know, on each of the Wonder Twins, we were going to take a small bone out of each hand and transplant it into the other one's hand. And then our idea was you do away with the limitation then that they have to like fist bump or high five or whatever. They have to make some kind of contact for their powers to work. So we were going to do away with that concept entirely. And the idea with this bone transplant was going to be they're always making contact with each other, which we didn't do it for a variety of reasons. One is it feels kind of like cheating in a way, you know. But then at another point, we were talking about Jaina um, basically using her power to just be like the most beautiful woman in the world. And like this predates the Kardashian stuff, but that's more or less kind of how we were thinking about it was Jaina being this sort of Kardashian-ish figure that wouldn't even fight crime anymore. She would just be kind of famous for her beauty. But, you know, the secret is it's not that she kind of grew up to become beautiful. It's she actually was going to like change into an old woman or something every night. And again, this is the idea that they've been around since the 70s. So in the modern day, you know, she'd be whatever age, kind of old. But like I remember we were throwing that idea around for a while and you know, stuff like that. But um I feel like, you know, my kids, their contribution to the whole thing for us was that the Wonder Twins don't have to become these horror characters. They can just be old-fashioned superheroes and they actually work. That they're fine. It's just a matter of um finding a good thing to turn into, right? That if you turn into something stupid, that's on the player. You know what I mean? Or the writer, as the case may be. So my kid's contribution was we never made the Wonder Twins dark. I would compare the tone of a lot of those games to like Spider-Man stuff. Not really the Howard thing, you know. We've kind of swept that under the rug in a way. I'm to this day, I mean honestly, I was very, very close. I actually went into the AI for the art for this episode. And I did originally. I made a purple gorilla with a baseball bat made out of ice, and that was going to be my homage to Howard. But thanks to my kids, the Wonder Twins stayed upbeat the whole time. You know what I mean? Thanks to Seidner, we sort of said, you know what? The Wonder Twins are actually these Justice League level, incredibly powerful characters. You know, they just had to figure out what they were capable of doing. And, when they were teenagers in the 70s, they're not there yet. But by the time you get to the 80s and they're in their 20s, it's Godzilla time. You know what I mean? Um, but yeah, because of all that, I genuinely feel like our Wonder Twins are cool. I genuinely love them. Um, so on and so forth. So I enjoyed all of that stuff. Hopefully you enjoyed hearing about it. And you know the routine, right? Take a moment of your time. It would really help out our channel. It helps more eyes find the channel, you know. That's what I want on my end is I just want to share this stuff with everybody, because I love it so much. Um, and yeah, the way you can help me out is by hitting the like button. Make sure you're subscribed because they'll unsubscribe you when you don't notice, and we don't want you to drift away. Um, what am I leaving out? Oh, ring the bell so you know when we do upload more stuff. And last but not least, leave us a comment. I love hearing from you guys. And the comment thing helps out a lot with the YouTube algorithm. So, from all of us here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.